In 2018, the Army missed its recruitment goal by about 6,500. And in 2022, the US Army came up 25% short of its recruitment goal, or the equivalent of 15,000 soldiers. And it's crazy to me to think that US Army recruiters did not manage to meet their goals despite a bunch of waivers and offering $40,000 enlistment bonuses. And projections for 2023 indicate another drop of 23,000 positions, or the equivalent of 9 to 10 brigade combat teams. So why is the US Army losing recruits? The worst is that somehow the leadership of the US military has no clue as to why this is happening. Me neither. I have absolutely no clue. What could possibly be the reason behind it? Okay, now that we're done the foreplay and that you guys are all looped up, let's cut the chase. The main problem is that the US Army has gone woke. Not necessarily the soldiers, but the leadership has definitely gone woke. And since we're talking about a cutting-edge recruitment ad, this video is sponsored by Kamikoto Japanese steel knives. These knives are made with elite quality Japanese steel, meticulously handcrafted using traditional techniques that date back 800 years. Kamikoto Japanese steel knives are used by Michelin star chefs around the world and can turn you into an elite master chef. With regular knives, you can't cut through anything, and it takes so long. And this is the Kamikoto Japanese steel knife. Look at that, I cut through this pineapple like butter. Effortless precision, speed, and strength. That single bevel edge means Kamikoto knives can achieve an unbelievable sharp edge that you just can't get with other knives. Each Kamikoto Japanese steel knife is crafted through a rigorous 19-step process that takes years. Then they're individually inspected, and they all come with a lifetime guarantee. In front of your door, you will see this beautiful heavy-duty ashwood box, which makes it a great gift for Christmas. Kamikoto is running a massive Black Friday sale right now and is offering my viewers an extra $50 off on any purchase with discount code HistoryLegends. Go to kamikoto.com/HistoryLegends and help support the channel. To get Kamikoto Japanese steel knives, click the link in the description below for kamikoto.com/HistoryLegends. Instead of a laissez-faire recruitment, the US military recruitment campaigns consistently have the themes of inclusivity and diversity pushed down our throats. I mean, I'm not an American, so I speak as an outsider. Let's take another look at the Army's latest recruitment campaign, The Calling. When I first saw this, I thought it was the new poster for Woke of Duty. Let's analyze this a bit more. We see 2 males, 3 females. Our beloved BLM Emma with 2 moms on the right. And then we have a diverse set of African Americans, Asians, and Hispanics. But this recruitment ad screams, we don't want white males, considering that the majority of combat personnel are white males. I get it, perhaps the military was just tired of the sausage fest. But then I went to the US Army's recruitment website, and this is the first thing I saw. The banner, 3 females, 3 tough females, Asian and Hispanic. Oh my god, the US Army is inclusive and diverse, and they're girls too? Where do I sign? I'm kidding. The Department of Defense even has a military leadership diversity commission, like anti-racist political commissars. And of course, they always come to the same conclusion. And when I scroll down, I get to this section. Finally, some dude. Am I the only one feeling like that? But this guy doesn't even look like he wants to be there. He's like FML. And then there's this section to enlist as an officer, where we see a Hispanic woman. And only if you scroll down at the very end, we see a white male from the back, in the dark, on his computer looking like a nerd, like an incel. The problem is not promoting diversity, it's how it's done. This page lacks masculinity. This page averages 15 nanograms of testosterone. Now, all this wokeness is not as obvious with the Marine Corps, but I feel the underlying message is still very present. And lately, I feel there's an emphasis on female combat leaders. Let's just take a look at old US military commercials from the 1980s.
Teamwork. For over 200 years, the Marines have met challenges, walked proud, and always as a team. That's why in a world full of uniforms, only one says United States Marine. Maybe you can be one of us. The few, the proud, the Marines.
There were a few proud men. Men of adventure. Men of courage. Men who knew the meaning of honor. There still are. The few, the proud, the Marines.
I feel the old ads were not necessarily action movie trailers. Instead of worrying about ticking off boxes for diversity, they spoke of the exclusive privilege to be a Marine. They spoke of masculine values like honor, pride, and courage. And that was all it took for many to enlist in the 1980s. Instead of dropping its woke ideology, the US military simply gaslighted American youth. 17 to 24-year-olds, saying how they're unfit for service, overweight, how they suffer from drug and alcohol abuse. That's pure copium. This is the same excuse for the past 40 years. There's this article from 1988 asking if American youth are unfit. And then again in 2006 and again in 2022. The US produces so many athletes from this 17 to 24-year-old cohort, but the country is so unhealthy and fat. Sure, the New York Times believes, with many more jobs available than people to fill them. This is also a factor as rising civilian wages and benefits make military service less enticing. Meanwhile, the Washington Times believes that it's because patriotism that fueled the rush to military service in the wake of September 11th attacks has dimmed. I also did a poll on my Instagram. And some say that Gen Z, so 17 to 24-year-olds, have witnessed 20 years of wars in the Middle East, in Iraq, Afghanistan, which gave a bad image to the US military, and which culminated in the disastrous withdrawal from Kabul in 2021. And many said this is why they don't want to join. All we know is that the youth doesn't see the military the same way. A survey from fall 2021 shows that only 9% of 16 to 24-year-olds are interested in serving in the military, down from 13% in 2018 and 15% in 2013. That's a 40% drop in less than a decade. I wonder what happened in that decade. I understand that this is a multifactorial problem and that all these reasons hold some truth. Question is, which is the most important factor? It seems the army going woke is the leading factor, to the point where the military has alienated conservative, patriotic Americans. And it seems what's bothering a lot of people is the heavy politicization of every branch of the United States Armed Forces. And the worst is that this woke strategy was already tried by the British military a couple years ago. People were presented with posters like these ones. Oh yeah, that certainly speaks to the average British recruit. And people were presented commercials like these ones.
Pas tout fragile.
Well, yeah, gonna need some more for that.
And everybody in the UK was shocked that the country missed its recruitment goals 6 years in a row. Personally, I think that all this talk in the US military about race is so toxic. And there's so many people in the US that have a mixed heritage. You have half Latino, half white. Then you have some people that are a bit native, a bit black, and a bit Asian. You have all sorts of people mixed today. In what box do they even fit in? I think the US should just drop all these requirements for race, ethnicity, gender. Whoever fits the requirements and all the tests, you go to the next step. But no, promoting excellence is racist. But the leadership really wants the military to be an exact copy of the diverse demographics of the US population. Otherwise, it's a proof of racist white patriarchy. General Milley even said, the military as a whole is about 20% black, yet only 2 of 41 4-star generals and admirals are black. Here from NBC, the US military is too white and too male at the top. I'm telling you, this conversation is so toxic. Why don't we say the same thing about sports? African Americans are disproportionately represented in the NFL. Is that a problem? No! They got there by merit, and it should be the same thing in the military. NBC News continues, efforts over the years to develop a more equal opportunity military have increased the number of women and racial and ethnic minorities in the ranks of leadership. But the armed forces have not yet succeeded in developing a continuing stream of leaders who are as diverse as the nation they serve. They always blame racism, patriarchy and all this, but they forget an important factor. The US military is now an all-volunteer force. Men and women of any background can choose their branch and career. According to the Carnegie Endowment, African Americans historically have been assessed into non-combat career fields and have tended to opt for careers in supporting branches, such as logistics and personnel. In comparison, white Americans have had a higher preference for combat roles, which make up nearly 80% of flag and general officers. The Military Times interviewed a couple people in the US Army, and here's what they had to say. I 100% believe the military is woke. I see people not adhering to military standards. Another said, nobody corrects them due to the fear of being fired or labeled as racist or sexist. Of course, I cannot confirm the validity of these claims. But if we take a look at internal army figures from April, we see that 44% of women failed the new army fitness test compared to 7% of men since October 1st. And instead of just accepting these results on principles of equality, what did they do? They blamed the military. Like this article claims, women are being set up to fail. And what happens next? Army approves reduced physical fitness standards for women. The US political leadership creates an unrealistic goalpost, and they'll tweak the rules to achieve it. Now if we take a look at this map from Business Insider, we can see the proportion of enlisted personnel by their regional areas. Right off the bat, we can see that conservative, Republican states are indeed more likely to enlist. But there's more. It's those conservative and rural families that provide a large number of America's service members. And it seems those are the ones saying no thanks to the wokeness. They probably don't want to be lectured about white privilege, considering that they all have somebody in their family that fought and died for the United States in Vietnam, Korea, World War II, World War I. They had the privilege to die. But as you can see on the map, Georgia is a recruiting powerhouse, except Atlanta, which is not. I don't know, maybe the demographics of Atlanta is a bit different. But once again, this confirms the urban and rural divide. And there's something else I thought was very interesting. Notice how the South, former Confederate states, are proportionately overly represented in the military. Some scholars refer to this phenomenon as the Southern military tradition. Although this idea is romantic, this phenomenon is quite recent in US history. There's an easy answer. After the draft ended in 1973, enlistments shifted steadily south of the Mason-Dixon line. The military's decision to close many bases in northern states where long winters limited training only hastened the trend. That's why states like Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, or Georgia are home to a large number of naval, marine, army, and air force bases. And since the 1970s, this military culture became a family business, passed from one generation to another. Data shows that 83% of the young men and women coming into the army are coming from military families, and 25% had a parent in the military. For example, in Colorado Springs, the high schools with the highest number of military families are also the biggest producers of recruits. And it makes sense if everybody around you served in the military. Your teachers, basketball coaches, restaurant owners, you're more likely to serve. Have you ever heard of a town called Fayetteville in North Carolina? Well, it's the same thing there. It's a place which is home to Fort Bragg. Fort Liberty. It provided more than twice as many military enlistment contracts as Manhattan, even though Manhattan has 8 times the population. And here's the big clue as to why the US Army is losing recruits. A survey released this year of more than 8,600 military families found that troops are becoming less likely to recommend that their kids join up, potentially cutting into a traditional reliable recruiting pool. And the crazy thing is that recommendations dropped from 74.5% in 2019 to 62.9% in 2021. And that roughly 10% gap could explain the lower recruitment for 2022. And many of these families say that this is not the same military they served in, and they blame wokeness. As they're constantly online, the youth has access to hundreds of articles criticizing the United States for being a racist country, and in turn the US military was next on the chopping block, as it suffered from the same stigma for its so-called lack of diversity and inclusivity. For example, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin also issued a historic stand-down order in February 2021, forcing all servicemen across every branch of the military to reflect on the issue of extremism, aka white supremacy. Here's an article from the New York Post. According to this article, cadets are taught how whiteness is a location of structural advantage of race privilege. Another slide addresses affirmative action and asks, do you think affirmative action creates an environment for reverse discrimination? Use critical race theory to support your answer. Those types of questions will definitely make great warriors, great social justice warriors that will tweet about white privilege. Whoops! Not anymore. Once again, pushed by Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, the United States put in place the Naming Commission, established by Congress last year, which took inventory of all the military's contemporary references to the Confederacy. In total, the commission found some 1,100 Confederate references across the Defense Department, including the missile cruiser USS Chancellorsville, which was named after a major Southern victory in the battle against the Union. And because of that, military.com wrote that 9 Army bases honoring Confederate rebels will be renamed after a diverse roster of historical figures, including women and minorities. They continue by saying that this is a radical departure from mostly naming bases after white men. And we're not even talking about the 1619 Project or how the US was founded on slavery, how the country is so racist, how the military is so racist on a daily basis in the media. With all this messaging, how can you convince young males to fight for a country that despises them? And the fact that the job market is so good makes this transition even easier. And the irony of it all, woke policies alienated a lot of the traditional rural white conservative base, but with the same rhetoric, failed to compensate for the loss with the rest of America that saw the military as a racist, misogynist, and outdated institution. The leadership shot itself in the foot. For example, in 2019, the Army made a push to increase recruitment efforts in 22 liberal leading cities like Los Angeles. And basically, military recruiters are not even allowed in schools. In a lot of left-leaning districts, recruiters are not even allowed in or only a very limited amount of time, and therefore they're less likely to push enlistment rates. We're presented with Patricia Heidman, who's in charge of high school instruction for the school district. And she says that the military preys on disadvantaged students, that the military is especially targeting Hispanic and Black students of poverty. So in the end, perhaps it's not the US military that is woke. It's the people working for a lot of the country's institutions that have been indoctrinated with woke ideology. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to subscribe to my Patreon or check out my PayPal.